I'm Dr. Rachel Griffiths, and I'm with my father and partner in aquatics.
Dr. Tom Griffiths.
Welcome to the Drowning Files, where each week we discuss a lawsuit we've been involved in or another true story with suggestions to learn from these tragedies to save lives. What case do you have today?
Today, I'd like to talk about recent events. I know we have spoken about rip currents before, but in the last week, we've had 8 rip current deaths, drowning deaths in Florida alone. And I'd really like to talk about these because there's different spins on these cases that fortify what we said in the past, how dangerous they are. And so, if you let me, Rach, I'd like to start with the husband and wife from Pennsylvania that drowned in a rip current near Port St. Louis, Florida. And what happened in this case, it was a family vacation. A mother and a father with their 4 children went to the beach. It is my understanding that all of the members of the family went into the water, and immediately the father and the mother got caught in the rip current. Based on media accounts, and this just happened within the past week, based on media accounts, the children were caught in a rip, but were able to escape it. And the real different thing about this particular case was that the children got out of the rip, went to the shoreline, and then were directing their parents how to swim parallel to shore and out of the current. So this was highly unusual, where family members or even bystanders, if you want to call them that, were directing the people caught in the rip current how to escape. But the point I want to emphasize here is that the parents panicked. Like most people in a rip current, they panic. And panic is an emotional, irrational fear, which makes you incapable of helping yourself. And the problem with the rip current is that most people, when they panic, swim directly to shore, which is the worst thing. And they're more likely to aspirate more water because the current going out is hitting the victims right in the face. So we don't have a lot of detail. I know people often ask for very, very specifics, but we do know that this family from Pennsylvania, both the husband and the wife, the mother and the father, both drowned with their 4 children, not only watching, but trying to direct them out of the rip current. And these 2 lives and this horrible tragedy to the family. Just imagine now the children watch their parents drown right before their eyes. So that's one instance of what happened within the past week in the United States in Florida. So this was on the east coast of Florida. On the west coast of Florida, in the Panhandle, you have a city called Panama City, Florida, and it juts way out close to Alabama. And the city has known of its reputation for having rip currents, and they've done a whole lot to warn people. They put up signs. They even have flashing boards as you drive into Panama City saying rip current advisory. They do have patrols on the beach. They really go out of their way to educate and warn their guests, their beachgoers, about the rip currents. In this tragic case, 3 young men in their 20s drove from Birmingham, Alabama to Panama City, Florida, which is not far. They got to their rental place. I believe it was an Airbnb. I'm not 100% certain. And immediately went to the Gulf. This is the Gulf of Mexico now. And as soon as they jumped into the water, apparently they were grabbed by a rip current and taken out to sea. And all 3 boys perished basically simultaneously. And, this is a horrific death. Again, details are sparse, but we do know that they quickly went into the water in the early evening hours and just did not come out. Now, those are the 5 specific deaths that I know about from last week. And apparently, when I got my Google alert today, it said that 6 people had died in rip currents in Panama City in the past week. So those are 3 of them. I don't know about the other 3, but we just have to do a better job of educating and warning beachgoers about rip currents. And you and I have both said knee deep is too deep. We don't want people swimming in the ocean or the Gulf when rip currents are present, and they need to be swimming in front of a lifeguard, not after hours. And so this is extremely important. I might point out that in the east coast of Florida, the 2 parents who drowned together, there were no lifeguards on duty. I don't know what the warnings and signage were, but there were no lifeguards on duty. I believe the case in Panama City, I'm not 100% certain, but I think the boys entered the water in the evening hours after the lifeguards had gone home. But again, I'm assuming that. I don't know for certain. So these are 2 cases, 2 independent cases that illustrate just how dangerous rip currents can be. And so that's what I have for you, Rach, today.
And do you want to talk about what to do if you're in a rip current?
Yeah, of course. And I'm sorry, I should have said that. Rip currents are easy to get out of. We have discussed this a lot. They're very, very strong currents going out to sea, but there's 2 things in favor of the victims caught in the rip. Number one, most rip currents don't go that far. They may go a couple hundred yards out to sea, and then they just dissipate. And then secondly, in favor of the victim, is they're very narrow. They could be less wide than a 2-lane street. And so if people would know when the shoreline is disappearing in front of their eyes, that they have 2 options now. They can either swim parallel to shore, to the left or the right, away from the rip current, and they'll get out soon, or they can just relax and go with it. And then when it dissipates, they can move over a little and swim back. I might add that I've written about rip currents. I've rescued a swimmer in a rip current, but a frightening experience for me was getting caught in a rip current in Costa Rica at a beach that's notorious for rip currents, where they have a lot of rip current deaths. And it was fascinating because my wife was sitting on the back of the beach watching me. She was sitting up, and I was in the water swimming around, and I looked at her, and I could see her just disappearing. She became smaller and smaller. And the reason why I was so surprised is because I didn't feel any suction or any movement at all. I just thought I was naturally treading in the water, and I didn't know that I was moving until I saw her disappear. So I just took a deep breath and tried to relax and moved to the left. As I remember, I swam parallel to shore, and almost immediately after half a dozen strokes, it lost its grab of me, and then I swam back to shore.